I am Althea. I am 28 years old, and for 3 years I paid every single bill in my apartment on my own. No help from my parents, no roommates, no safety net. Just me, my salary from a graphic design job in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that everything inside those 4 walls belonged to me. That apartment was not just a place to sleep. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. And then one Tuesday evening, my own key stopped working in my own front door, and I found out my family had given my home away without asking me a single word. Before I tell you everything that happened, I want to know where you are watching from right now. Drop your city or your country in the comments below. And if you have ever had someone take something from you and act like they did you a favor, hit that like button right now, because this story is going to hit close to home. Subscribe if you are new here, because what I went through, how I handled it, and what happened to everyone involved after is a story you will want to hear from beginning to end. Stay with me. It was a Tuesday. I had worked a full day, sat through 2 back-to-back client meetings, and driven 40 minutes home through traffic. When I got to my floor, I put my key in the lock the same way I had done hundreds of times before. The key went in. It turned, but the door did not open. I pulled the key out, checked that it was the right one, and tried again. Nothing. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then I heard movement inside. Someone was in my apartment. I knocked on my own door. The sound of footsteps came closer, paused, and then went away without the door opening. I stepped back into the hallway and called my mother, Noreen. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was calm, completely calm, as if she had been expecting my call and had already decided how the conversation would go. She told me that my sister Briony had finalized her divorce from her husband, Cedric, and needed a place to stay right away. She told me the family had decided that since Briony had nowhere to go, she would move into my apartment temporarily. She said I was young, I had a good income, I was capable, and I could find somewhere else to stay. She had not called me before doing it. There was no text message, no warning, no conversation. My mother had arranged for my sister to move into the home I paid for, changed the lock so I could not get in, and had fully expected me to simply accept that. I asked her when exactly she had planned to tell me. She said Briony needed time to settle in first. I asked if I could at least come inside and get my things. She told me to give it a few days. I ended the call. I stood in that hallway with my bag on my shoulder, outside my own apartment, and I did not call her back. I did not go to a friend's place to cry about it. I opened my phone and I called the police. While I waited for the officers to arrive, I thought about every time Briony had come first. When Briony got married, my parents organized a celebration that lasted an entire weekend. When I graduated from college, my mother said good job, and then asked Briony if she needed money for her honeymoon. I had told myself those things were small. I had let them go because I thought that was what you did for family. But standing in that hallway, I understood that what was happening was not about Briony's divorce or Briony's pain. They had taken something that belonged to me because they had never, not once, treated my independence as something worth protecting. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them my lease agreement, which had my name and only my name on it. I showed them my photo identification. They reviewed everything, confirmed that I was the legal tenant of record, and knocked on the door. Briony opened it. For one moment she looked genuinely surprised, as if the idea that I would involve law enforcement had never occurred to her. Then her expression changed entirely. She told the officers that our mother had given her permission to be there. She said this was a family matter, and that the police had no business getting involved. The officers explained to her, clearly and without any room for misunderstanding, that our mother's permission had no legal standing because our mother's name was not on the lease. The apartment was mine under contract, and Briony had entered without my consent, and with a changed lock that prevented me from accessing my own property. Briony did not accept this quietly. She raised her voice. She told the officers that I had always been jealous of her, that I was using a painful moment in her life to humiliate her, that a real sister would never do something like this. One of the officers repeated calmly that she needed to collect her belongings and leave the premises. Briony looked at me once hard, and then went inside to pack. While she was in the back room, I walked through my apartment. My furniture had been rearranged. Boxes I had stacked in the corner of the living room had been pushed against the wall to make space for Briony's luggage. My desk had 2 of her bags sitting on top of it. The refrigerator held food I had not bought. I took out my phone and photographed everything. Every displaced item, every corner, every piece of evidence that someone had moved into my space without my knowledge. I was not doing it out of anger in that moment. I was doing it because I had already started thinking about what came next. My phone rang while Briony was still packing. It was my mother. She had gotten a message from Briony and she knew exactly what was happening. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask to hear my side. She started talking the moment I answered and told me I was humiliating the family, that the neighbors would see police cars outside, that Briony was fragile right now and I was making everything worse. I listened to her finish. Then I told her I would call her back later and I ended the call. She called again immediately. I did not pick up. Briony walked out with her bags without looking at me. The officers stayed until she was gone. I thanked them and closed the door. That same evening, I contacted a locksmith and had every lock in the apartment replaced. When the locksmith left, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and searched for civil attorneys in Charlotte who specialized in property disputes and unlawful entry. I found Marcus Obi through a referral from a coworker who had dealt with a landlord dispute the year before. Marcus had been practicing civil law for over 15 years, and he specialized in property rights and residential disputes. I brought everything to our first meeting: the lease, the police report from that evening, the photographs I had taken inside the apartment, a written account of my phone call with my mother, and the locksmith receipt. Marcus looked through all of it without rushing. Then he told me I had a solid case. He explained that what Briony had done, entering and occupying my apartment without my consent, using a key she had been given by someone with no legal authority over the property, constituted unlawful entry and interference with my right to occupy my home. He told me I could pursue civil damages including compensation for the physical disturbance of my property, the cost of changing the locks, the period during which I was denied access to my own home, and demonstrable emotional harm. We spent 2 more meetings building the case. I wrote out a full timeline of events with exact dates and times. Marcus requested the official police report and gathered documentation on comparable cases. He explained what the hearing would look like, what Briony could argue, and why each of those arguments would fail given the evidence. 3 days after I met with Marcus the first time, my father called. His name is Raymond, and where my mother leads with volume, my father leads with reason. He did not raise his voice. He told me he understood I was upset, but that this was a family matter, and that taking it to a courtroom would create damage that could never be undone. He asked me to think about what I was doing to the family long term. I let him finish, and then I asked him directly, "Did you know they were going to change my lock before I got home that night?" He went quiet, not the silence of someone thinking about their answer, the silence of someone who already knew the answer and was deciding how much to say. Then he told me he had not been directly involved, but he had known about the plan in advance. That was the moment I understood this had not been a sudden decision my mother made alone. My father had known and had said nothing to me. My Aunt Delphine came to the apartment in person about a week later. She is my mother's younger sister, and she has always been the one the family sends when they want something to sound reasonable. She brought food and sat down at my kitchen table and spoke in the warm voice she uses when she wants a conversation to go a certain way. She told me Briony was staying with her now and was having a very hard time. She proposed that if I dropped the legal action, Briony would apologize to me and the family could move forward. I asked Aunt Delphine a simple question: if Briony needed a place to stay so urgently, why had no one asked whether she could stay with Aunt Delphine instead of taking over my apartment without my knowledge? Aunt Delphine opened her mouth and then closed it. She did not have an answer because there was no good answer. Briony could have stayed with her. Briony could have stayed in a short-term rental. There were options that did not involve removing me from my own home. The family had simply not considered those options because they had not considered my home, something I had the right to protect. The hearing took place 6 weeks after I filed. Briony arrived with no legal representation and a printed copy of a text message from my mother saying she had Noreen's permission to be in the apartment. The judge reviewed it, noted that Noreen had no contractual relationship with the property, and set the message aside. Marcus walked through the evidence point by point. When Briony was asked to explain her basis for entering the apartment, she said her family had arranged it and she had believed it was acceptable. She had no documentation, no lease agreement, no sublease, nothing in writing that gave her any legal standing. My mother was called to give a statement. She confirmed under oath that she had arranged for Briony to enter the apartment and that she had organized the lock change. She confirmed she had not consulted me. She confirmed she had known I would object. The judgment came back in my favor. Brioni was ordered to pay $15,400 in total, covering property interference, the cost of the locksmith and legal fees, the period of time I was locked out of my own home, and additional damages the court found appropriate given the documented circumstances. Brioni sat very still when the amount was read. My mother did not look at me when we left the building. 4 days after the judgment, Brioni posted on Facebook. She did not use my name, but she described the situation with enough detail that anyone who knew us both understood exactly who she was talking about. She wrote about going through the hardest time of her life after her divorce, about having nowhere to turn, about reaching out to family for help, and being met with cruelty. She described being removed from a place she had been told was safe for her. She talked about being served with legal action by someone who was supposed to love her. The post received over 200 reactions and dozens of comments within the first day. Messages started coming to me from people I had not spoken to in years. Some asked what had happened. Most did not ask. A woman I had known since middle school, Patris, sent me a message telling me that what I had done was excessive and that Brioni was clearly struggling and I should have found a way to help rather than calling the police. 2 people I had considered friends since college removed me from their social media without a word. A cousin I had grown up with sent a single message that said, "Wow," and nothing else. I read all of it. I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time after going through the comments and messages. And then I made a decision. I did not post anything. I did not respond to Patris or the cousin or anyone who had sent a judgment without asking me a single question. I had a court judgment with my name on it and Brioni's name on it and a number attached to it that reflected what a neutral authority had determined after reviewing every piece of evidence. That document said more than anything I could write in a caption. The only person who reached out from that side of the situation and made me feel something different was Cedric. He sent me a message through a platform we had both used years ago, before the divorce. He said he had seen what was circulating, and he wanted me to know that he understood what I had done and why, that I had not done anything wrong. He told me he had spent years inside that family dynamic and he knew exactly how it worked, that the people who raised Brioni had always believed that Brioni's needs were the ones that mattered most regardless of the cost to anyone else, and that leaving had been the most difficult and most necessary thing he had ever done. He did not ask me to respond. He just said he wanted me to know. That message stayed with me. Not because I needed his validation to feel confident in my decision, but because he was the only person who had been inside that family from the outside who confirmed, without being asked, that what I had lived through was real. Jennifer was the person who got me through the weeks that followed the social media fallout. She did not try to fix anything or reframe anything. She called me and asked if I wanted to get dinner. We went to a place we both liked, sat across from each other, and talked about everything and nothing. She mentioned, without pressure, that she had been seeing a therapist named Dr. Ren Calloway and that it had helped her during a rough stretch. She gave me the name and said it was there if I ever wanted it. She did not bring it up again. I called Dr. Calloway's office 2 weeks later. The B letter 1ED3ITH letter 1B0 letter 1EDDNG from the court order covered the repairs I needed. I hired a painter to redo 2 of the walls, and I replaced the rug that had been damaged. There were a few smaller items I handled myself. I moved furniture back to where it had been, repacked what had been disturbed, and went through every corner of the apartment until it felt like mine again. That process took almost a full weekend. By Sunday evening, the apartment was clean and reset, and recognizably the space I had built over 3 years. I found my watercolor set while reorganizing the storage area near the front closet. It had been packed in a box since my first year at the design job. I had stopped painting when my schedule got busy, and I had told myself I would come back to it when things settled. Things never settle on their own, and so the box had stayed where I put it for almost 2 years. I pulled it out and set everything up at the kitchen table. The first piece I painted that night was not good. The proportions were off and the colors bled in ways I had not intended. I did not put it away. I started a second piece the following evening. By the 5th piece I could see what I was doing and why I had loved it in the first place. I realized, sitting at that table on a weeknight with paint on my hands, that I had not stopped painting because I was too busy. I had slowly stopped doing most things that were purely for myself over the past few years. The apartment, the job, the routine, these had all been mine, but the parts of me that existed outside of productivity had been quietly set aside. I did not arrive at that thought dramatically. It came to me the way most honest things do, quietly and without fanfare. The sessions with Dr. Calloway happened every other week at first and then weekly for a period. I went in without a fixed agenda. I talked about the apartment situation, about the night I came home to a locked door, about the phone call with my mother, about the hearing, about the Facebook post. Dr. Calloway listened and then started asking questions that moved backward in time. She asked about patterns. She asked about other moments when I had been asked to step aside for Briony. She asked how I had felt in those moments and what I had told myself to justify accepting it. The picture that came together across those sessions was not a revelation. It was more like seeing clearly something I had always known was there, but had never looked at directly. The favoritism in my family had not started with the apartment. It had been a consistent feature of how my family operated, and I had spent years finding ways to make it acceptable in my own mind, because the alternative, which was to name it and respond to it, felt like an act of disloyalty. Dr. Calloway did not tell me what to feel about my family. She helped me understand the difference between a conclusion I had been pressured into and one I had actually examined. By the end of that period of sessions, I had not written my parents off or made any dramatic announcements. I had simply started being honest with myself about what I was and was not willing to accept going forward. Thanksgiving came while I was still seeing Dr. Calloway regularly. My mother called 2 weeks before to ask what time I was coming over. I told her calmly that I had other plans this year. She asked what plans. I told her I was spending the day with friends. She went quiet, and then she said that family was supposed to be together on holidays. I told her I agreed and that I hoped she had a good day. She ended the call without responding. I spent Thanksgiving with Jennifer and a group of people I had come to know through her. It was the first holiday in years where I did not spend any part of the day monitoring a room for tension. The apartment looks different now in a way that is entirely intentional. The walls have a fresh coat of paint. The rug is new. Every lock is new. And on the wall of the living room, I hung 5 small watercolor pieces in simple frames. They are the only decorative things on that wall, and they are the first things in the apartment that I made rather than bought. Every time I walk past them, I notice them, not because they are exceptional paintings, but because they are there because I put them there, and for no other reason. Briony did not contact me after the judgment. The $15,400 she owed me was paid in 2 installments over 4 months, which I was told came partly from her savings and partly from money my parents gave her. I have no confirmation of that last part. I do not know the details of how she gathered it, and I did not ask. My mother sends occasional text messages asking how I am doing, short and surface level, nothing that touches on what happened. My father called once a few months after the judgment and asked how work was going. I answered his questions. We talked for about 10 minutes. It was the most genuine conversation we had managed since before all of this started. I do not know what it means for the long term. I did not try to assign it meaning while it was happening. I ran into Cedric on a Thursday evening in late October. I had stopped into a small coffee shop near my office to get something before the drive home. He was sitting at a corner table with a book. We recognized each other at the same moment. He waved. I walked over. We talked for close to 40 minutes, and we did not spend any of it on Briony or the divorce or the lawsuit. He told me he had moved to a different neighborhood, that he was taking guitar lessons again after dropping them in college, that he had started cooking on weekends as a way to slow down. I told him about the watercolors. He laughed and said it was funny how we both went back to things we had abandoned when life got crowded. I agreed. When I left the coffee shop and walked to my car, I thought about that conversation and about how 2 people who had been adjacent to the same painful situation had both ended up talking about reclaiming something ordinary and personal. That seemed right to me. Here is what I know now that I did not fully understand before all of this happened. Being willing to defend what is yours is not the same as being unkind. Calling the police that night was not a betrayal of my family. It was a decision I made when every other option had already been removed. My mother did not call me. My father did not call me. Briony did not knock on my door to talk. They made a decision about my life and my home, and they expected me to comply with it because that was the pattern we had all been living inside for years. The moment I did not comply, the moment I stood in that hallway and dialed instead of just going along, everything shifted. Not because I became someone different, but because I stopped pretending the pattern was acceptable. The part that took the longest to sit with was not the legal process or the social media fallout. It was learning to stop feeling guilty for protecting myself. Guilt is persistent when it comes from people who raised you. It does not go away because you won a court case or because logic is on your side. It fades when you decide, over and over again in small moments, that you are allowed to have things that are yours and to say so when someone tries to take them. I still live in the same apartment. I still drive the same route to work. My life from the outside looks almost identical to what it was before that Tuesday evening, but I know the difference. And I know that if anyone, regardless of who they are to me, decides to take what is mine without asking, I will know exactly what to do. Now I want to hear from you. Has someone in your family ever taken something that belonged to you and justified it by saying you could handle it or that someone else needed it more? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video gave you something to think about or something you needed to hear, please hit the like button, share this with someone who might need it right now, and subscribe if you have not already. There are more stories coming, and every single one of them is real. Thank you for being here and for taking the time to listen all the way to the end. You are not alone in this. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.